Hello and welcome back to Granbury Volunteer Fire Department's online fire academy. I am Matt Hohan, Captain of Operations, and today we're going to cover Section 8, Rescue Operations, and then we're also going to have another presentation that follows this that is RIT, Rapid Intervention Team. This is a very important slide to me, and I take a lot of time, energy, and effort, and over the last several years have really looked at the way we run RIT and the way that we run RIT here in Granbury, and I have made some changes. Now we're going to go into the RIT slide in a lot more detail later, but there's a couple of sections that SFFMA wants us to go through first, and without further ado, we're going to go through those. Proper techniques for removal of an injured person from hazards by the use of the following carries, drags, and stretchers. Now, at the end of the day, this is primarily a skill slide, but the one thing that you need to take into consideration is how injured is the individual and how much danger are they in. And it's a sliding scale. If they're in little to no danger, then you can take a long time to move them. But if they're in critical danger or in critical health because of the danger, then our flexibility on moving them is really limited, and it comes down to time. If we move them, will they survive? And if we move them, will they be in a safer area? And if we move them, how critical a danger or critical a damage will we cause? At the end of the day, it is entirely subjective to the scenario, and I cannot emphasize that enough. What one scenario will present as, another one will not. And unfortunately, all the time, training, energy, and effort will never fully prepare you for in the event that you have to make the decision of how much danger this person's currently in, how bad their currently health is, and how I'm going to have to move them, and then ultimately, by moving them, do I cause any more damage to them, or do I potentially kill them? And unfortunately, this module, this section, there is a serious undertone to this, and we're going to have a really serious discussion in the realities that firefighters face when they're on scene. Searching for victims in burning smoke-filled buildings or other hostile environments. Two objectives to be achieved while searching for victims in a building on fire: finding the victim and obtaining information on the extent of the fire. As the firefighters are making their interior attack, there is radio terminology that you need to become very familiar with, and you're going to use this a lot. And it's called a UCAN or CAN report. UCAN stands for Unit, Condition, Action, Needs. A CAN report is Condition, Action, Needs. And I'm going to pause for a second here, and you need to write that down. You need to write down UCAN, you need to write down CAN, and you need to write down Unit, Condition, Action, Needs, and you need to write down Condition, Action, Needs. An example of a UCAN report that I'm going to give you is an interior crew that just made entry in the front door. They're progressing through the living room, and they're at a hallway trying to go to the back bedroom where there's a reported victim. The unit is going to be Rescue 1's interior crew. So they're going to come across the radio and say, "Command, Rescue 1 interior crew." Conditions are going to be whatever they see, whatever they're feeling, whatever they know. And in this case, they're going to say, heavy smoke, heavy fire in the hallway to the bedroom. Action: What are they physically doing? Are they making progress to the possible victim location, or are they having to stop because of the heavy fire conditions? And they was going to say progressing to the bedroom. And then the last part of this is needs. And they're going to call need another hose crew inside, or they need to ventilate, or whatever other needs that they have. And command is going to come across the radio and repeat back those instructions. UCAN reports are incredibly common. I wish I'd hear them a lot more on scenes, and we're trying really hard to get our new cadets to really start using CAN and UCAN reports all the time. They don't have to just be used in emergency traffic. So again, after the two objectives to be achieved for searching for victims, finding the victim, and physically communicating through UCAN or CAN reports, the skills portion of this is the one-story building filled with simulated smoke. Demonstrate the establishing of a search pattern of the building and multiple rooms that are involved, with a rope or hose line or without. And we're going to go into a lot more detail on the actual skills portion of this on how to actually search a room for victims. Life-threatening injuries that need to be observed in the proper order of priority. The one thing I really want to reiterate with this is the current injury versus the current state of danger they're in versus how much longer they can remain in that danger. And if they're critically injured but the danger level is critically high, or the hazard level is critically high, or the threat level to that individual is critically high, your ability to move them gently, nicely, or even without hurting them further is going to be incredibly subjective to on the scene. And there is nothing wrong with you having to make that decision to move the individual to get them to a safer space. I cannot emphasize that enough. Do not hesitate to move someone out of danger and into a safer area. Techniques of packaging a victim for emergency transportation by: given a short, long spine board and wrapping materials, demonstrate the stabilization of a victim's spine and cervical area of the body, and given a packaged victim and stretcher, demonstrate the transfer procedures of victims from their rescue scene. This is a skills portion. We'll definitely cover this in detail. We'll probably go in a lot more detail on a new module that we'll be creating for first responders and basic first aid on scene. Define the following: a lean-to collapse, a pancake floor collapse, and a V4 collapse. Now, what we're talking about here is you've had a building that has structurally failed, and that may be due to just significant overloading, poor construction, or just exposure to the environment over time, or even a natural disaster or a structure fire has compromised the building. There's a million reasons that would cause a building to fail, and what we're going to address is each one of these types of failures and what we're going to do with it and the potential saving of victims. Now, a lean-to collapse is probably one of the easier ones for survivors. And a lean-to collapse is the top right picture, where only one wall has failed. It has fallen down, but the floors and the other wall is still standing. There's a high survivability chance for victims in this type of collapse. Here's the problem. How do you physically get to the victims? I assure you, you're never going to get lucky enough that there's going to be a whole bunch of windows on the other side of the building that you can just make entry through. But don't be afraid to check. Always look. The other issue If you start just digging through the pile, well, that pile has some rigidity to it. It's also helping to hold the load up, even though it's compromised. So you don't want to just dive into the pile and start pulling things apart. A lean-to collapse is going to be best approached by coming at it from the sides. Flank the collapse and see if you can come in from the left or right and get to those void spaces where our victims are going to be trapped at. Now, a pancake floor collapse is going to be the bottom left picture, and that's where this building itself has completely failed. Walls have collapsed in, the floors have collapsed in, and unfortunately, your survival rate is incredibly low in this event. And I hate to give a really gruesome example, but the World Trade Center collapse on 9/11 is a perfect example of this. You had thousands and thousands and thousands of people still inside those buildings when they collapsed, and then look at how many actually survived. Very few. And you don't have to have a gigantic megastructure like a 100-story skyscraper to have very few survivors. Earthquakes are very prone to causing pancake collapses, and when they happen, even on a one-story house, it is very, very hard to find survivors in these types of structural collapses. The best way to search for victims for these collapses is to start at the top of the pile and work down. One of the more important communication methods here is, as you're doing your active rescue, stop every 10 or 15 minutes and listen for people hitting debris in the pile trying to get your attention, and listen for the yelling and screaming of your trapped victims. That's going to be one of the easiest ways to navigate these types of events. The last one is a V-floor collapse. And this one is where the walls did not fail, but the floor structure did. And as you see, there's two void spaces next to the walls, and that's where our victims are going to be at. Again, this type of rescue operation, I'd highly recommend using doors and windows to see if you can get into the void spaces. If you can't, approach it from the sides and come in and try and see if you can find victims in those void spaces. If you have any other questions on these, or you would like more of a discussion, definitely ask your instructors, and I would highly encourage you to have these discussions at your home departments. RIT, Rapid Intervention Team. And in quotes on our slide, there's nothing rapid about RIT. Now, for us to fully understand RIT, we're going to cover RIT in great detail and where RIT came from. And we're going to start with the Phoenix Fire Department, and we're going to go into great detail on how RIT became an actuality and how it's used nationwide, and how we can potentially look at the benefits and the consequences of RIT nationwide, and then potentially any changes to RIT that we want to make locally. What is the purpose of RIT, and where did it come from? I want you guys to write down what the purpose of RIT is, and where. I'm not talking about the city or state. I'm talking about what event happened to cause RIT to become an issue. Write your answers down, and I'll be back in a second. The purpose of RIT is the firefighters' emergency 911 call for help. And the group of people, the RIT team, are the ones coming to that firefighter's aid. RIT is the single most important job on a fire scene. Our jobs on scene are to help people protect their properties, save their lives, and do our best to protect our communities. But who's there to help us? Who's there to protect ourselves? And the answer is just that, ourselves. There is no one else out there to call. We have to rely on each other. And the critical role of RIT also explains, where did it come from? Previously to RIT, there had never been a really strong initiative across the country to have a specialized group of people that were set up that were intended to just be on standby for firefighter emergencies. Previously, if there wasn't a disaster or a major event that happened while you were on scene, you were pretty much on your own with the crew that you had, and then you needed to call command, and between yourself and command, you guys would orchestrate how to save yourselves. And this is the purpose of RIT, is to give those firefighters on scenes a possible another source of help that's dedicated to helping those firefighters in need. And that's what we're going to go into great detail on this slide. As we discussed earlier, the Mayday is the call for firefighter help. That is you announcing there's a critical problem and you need help. And in the early 90s, major departments decided to address the raising issue and create a program for these downed firefighters, for these trapped firefighters, and for these firefighters that were in need of help. RIT history. RIT was originally organized in the early 90s for firefighter rescues. The Mayday calls started to become overwhelming, and by the late 1990s, OSHA had declared the 2-in, 2-out rule. Now, the benefit of the 2-in, 2-out rule was for every 2 firefighters inside doing an interior attack, there was supposed to be 2 firefighters sitting outside of the structure for safety. Is there any issues for the 2-in, 2-out rule? Is there any issues that we would have as a volunteer fire department with 2-in, 2-out rule? It sounds like a great idea, but write down a couple of reasons at what you think the problems are with 2-in, 2-out rule for a volunteer fire department. One of the largest problems for volunteer fire departments, and this is true for Hood County, is that you don't know how many people you're going to have on an apparatus going to a call. On top of that, you don't know what type of qualified people you're going to have in the apparatus for that call. And then most importantly, when you get on scene, you don't know what the other departments arriving for mutual aid are going to have in the number of people on scene or the amount of qualified firefighters that are on that apparatus. And from a volunteer's perspective, it makes 2-in, 2-out almost impossible to maintain. On top of this, there's been a long propagating history of taking the physically most unfit firefighters or those that are brand new and putting them on RIT. Because at the end of the day, what do you really do with the 2 guys that are on RIT? If you put your strongest 2 firefighters on RIT, guess what you don't have? Your 2 strongest firefighters physically working the fire. And RIT's always been a catch-all and a black hole for most fire departments, and no one wants to be on RIT because, frankly, it sucks. It's always treated as a place where that's where all the new guys go, or that's where I'm going to sit there this entire fire and I'm not going to do anything. And RIT's always had a negative connotation because of that. So after OSHA got involved, it finally became a national standard, and fire departments across the country started to actually address the 2-in, 2-out rule and figure out ways to maintain a RIT team. And the first test of RIT was March 14th, 2001 at 5 p.m. There's a reported structure fire at a supermarket. And this is a picture of that structure of the supermarket. Engine 14 arrives quickly and is assigned with search and rescue, evacuation of victims, and find and extinguish the fire. Now you have 2 pictures here. Let's say that engine showed up with 6 firefighters, 1 engineer, 1 officer, and 4 firefighters. I want you to please tell me and think about this. How on earth are 5 people going to perform a search and rescue, evacuate the victims, find and extinguish that fire? Really let that sink in. Think about their task that they were given. Now, I assure you, other engines are en route, other apparatus are coming, they've got more people coming. Here's the problem. What can they actually do versus what their assignment is? That is the first major test or RIT, and we're going to go into great detail of this fire and of this event. So now we're going to follow this story. A firefighter, Brent Tarver, off of engine 14, and the rest of the engine crew make entry into the structure. The search is completed and no victims are found. Engine captains order his crew out due to deteriorating conditions. While following the hose line out, Tarver and another firefighter get separated from their crew. They seek a safer place away from the intense fire and move towards the back of the store. The only exit at this time is where they entered the structure. Command has just called all crews from their interior position and is about to initiate a defensive attack when the Mayday comes in. Now, really look at this whole story. This is a catastrophic event and it's unfolding right in front of them, and then the Mayday comes in. Command was not prepared to make any actions on a Mayday announcement. Command was preparing to go defensive and let this structure come down. His mindset is defensive, not Mayday at this point. Two separate RIT teams are deployed at the front of the store. Both teams can't move past the front door due to intense fire conditions. And if you look at the picture at the top right, that picture is taken at approximately the time that those two crews entered the store. So let's just look at the structure for half a second. That's pretty large, right? The whole store fills up just the picture, and the photographer's not right on top of the structure. On top of that, how serious is the fire inside right now? That's an incredibly serious fire. That's a huge fire, especially considering the size of the fire and the materials that are inside. Here's a question to think about real quick. Is that fire in the growth or flashover stage? Or is it in the fully developed stage? Just think about that for a second. Another RIT crew's deployed at the back of the store. You could see a picture on the bottom right. This is the point of entry that they made for the RIT crew on the back of the structure. The second firefighter with Tarver is successfully rescued relatively quickly. They get him out. So what we're going to look at here is an overall diagram of the entire structure and where the layout of the structure and command and entry points are made at. We're going to start at the very bottom of the picture at the command post. Command is set up across the street exactly where he's supposed to be at. Moving up, you can see the supermarket itself is actually a very large structure, but directly attached to the supermarket, on the lower left of the supermarket, is 3 other stores: a clothing store, a hardware store, and a barber shop. Now, the supermarket itself does not have just a standard footprint. On top of that, it's also got another exit on the north side of the structure that's not connected anywhere to the front side of the structure. And then completely on the back side of the structure, there's other businesses and shops, but there's no point of entry from those businesses to the supermarket. So there's effectively 2 ways in: the front door and then this south entrance. Now, what we're going to be looking at here is a more detailed drawing of the actual supermarket floor plan. And you can see at the bottom where they initially made an interior attack and where they started their searching for victims. And you can follow the hose line. That is the same hose line that Brent Tarver and the rescued firefighter were following when they got separated from their crews and ultimately got lost inside the structure and had to leave the main supermarket showroom floor and pushed into the off the supermarket and into the storage areas on the left side of the picture. And if you continue to look closely at these pictures, they'll tell you where the 3-foot wide steel man door's at on the far left of the picture, and then the 6-foot wide steel roll-up door. On this slide, it shows definitively at where Brent Tarver was found, and he was found on the floor in the meat preparation room. The rescued firefighter was found at position 1. He was in the cooler. This is an outside picture, and this is just showing the back service doors and then the main door into the prep area of the supermarket. Also in this picture, it shows origin of fire. This fire started in the dumpster and spread from the dumpster to a bunch of debris scattered around the dumpster and then ultimately into the building. That's what started this fire, a dumpster fire. This picture is obviously well after the fire and taken for the investigation. And this picture is taken with the back to the door that goes to the main grocery store, and then this would be the storage area of the actual supermarket. The main thing that I want to note on this slide is now this is with the photographer's back towards the actual steel door at the back of the building. This is just looking the other direction. What we're looking at is the direction of the victim and his crew were heading when they became separated from the other firefighters, and then noticeably the pallets of produce the victim and crew trapped over while exiting the produce storage area. I want you to notice at how the bins of crap are just laying right there in the middle of the walkway. We're going to come back to that stuff, but it turned out to be a gigantic factor in not only the hindering of the rescue, but the actual failure of the rescue. Now with this picture, we'll just start at the very top. Meat cooler where injured firefighter number 1 was found. So the surviving rescue firefighter was found in this meat cooler. Victim and injured firefighter number 1 were moved through swinging door to main storage room. So this is the arrows pointing to the exit point, and then the bottom approximate location where victim was found. Now, one thing I want you to take note of in this picture is really look at the damage in this room. How bad is it? All I see is smoke damage. I don't even see where the smoke came that far down the actual walls in the room. It's interesting that the firefighter died in this room, and yet there's little to no damage in the room other than smoke. Now, I'm going to give you the full story of this event. I've just given you the laid out facts, and I've intentionally held back some information just for dramatic effect and for something to you to really think about. Brent Tarver took almost 45 minutes to just finally pull his body out of the building. That 45 minutes, RIT teams made no less than 4 contacts with him. He was still alive and conscious on 3 of those. So, how did that happen? What happened? And how did he ultimately die? As Brent Tarver and the original rescued firefighter pushed into the produce area, they couldn't find their way out because there was no obvious doors or windows. The smoke levels were thick enough and high enough in that area that the firefighters couldn't even find the open doors that were being opened by the crews on the south side of that structure. On top of that, the crews that made entry through those doors had absolute hell navigating through the produce and pallets and just the overall storage of all the stuff inside the supermarket. So a combination of a thick smoke layer in the produce room, low visibility, and them not using any type of hose or any type of lifeline to navigate their way quickly back out of the structure made it almost impossible for the crews to move quickly. On top of all of this, as the fire crews reached Brent Tarver on the first round, they literally said, "We have the firefighter, we're making our way out." They would get outside the structure, and in this first round, they had the very first rescued firefighter with them. Everyone's outside, they're celebrating, great job, and then they look, and firefighter Tarver is not with the group. He didn't stay with them. He didn't follow them out. Second RIT crew makes entry on the back side. They make entry and progress to firefighter Tarver. Firefighter Tarver at this point is combative. He's not following directions. He's not making any sense. And they are having to physically push him out the door. They think they have him again. They've now convinced him to follow them on the way out of the structure. They get outside, and firefighter Tarver is not with them. The third RIT crew makes entry. They definitively know the area that he's in now. They quickly get to him. They find him. Firefighter Tarver has now taken off his bunker gear and his SCBA, and he is standing in his plain clothes trying to figure out what is wrong. Firefighter Tarver now has been exposed to the atmosphere. It is low in oxygen and filled with toxins. These firefighters find firefighter Tarver very combative, very confused, and unable to follow directions. They try and escort him out. He eventually succumbs to the environment and passes out. They begin to proceed to drag him out of the structure. They become overwhelmed. They have to retreat. And a fourth crew makes entry to start the rescue process of firefighter Tarver. As the fourth crew fully pulls him out of the structure, it's so tiring, it's so exhausting, and they've worked so hard pulling him out. What little PPE that he still had on, he's basically pulled out of the structure completely naked. And it's because the firefighters are just grabbing and pulling whatever they can to get him out of the structure. Another contributing factor, the firefighter Tarver was a physically very large man. He was something like 6'5", 6'6", and like 240, 250 pounds. As a big man, the crews doing the rescues just work themselves to exhaustion between navigating the floor space and having to deal with a large victim. All of these factors combined led to firefighter Tarver's death. 45 minutes for them to do that rescue. What the numbers say about RIT. Dr. Ron Perry was invited and worked with the Phoenix Fire Department after the incident and conducted over 200 RIT drills with Phoenix firefighters. This is what we learned from that study, and those numbers have not changed since that study. Let's go to the top and look at Table 1, Firefighter Tarver's rescue timetable. At 17:26, Firefighter Tarver issues his mayday. That is when the big red "Oh poop" button is mashed. Mayday, mayday, mayday. At 17:27, the RIT team deploys for an elapsed time of 1 minute. We're in good shape. At 17:36, the RIT team locates Firefighter Tarver for a total elapsed time of 9 minutes. So far, we're looking really good. At 18:19, Firefighter Tarver is out of the structure. It took 43 minutes for the RIT teams to actually get Tarver out of the structure for a total of 53 minutes. Now, let's drop down to Table 2, Rapid Intervention Time Summary. For the 200 RIT drills that were conducted, it took an average of 18.5 minutes to consume a 3,000 psi bottle. It took 2.5 minutes for the rescuers to be ready, and it took another 2.5 minutes for the rescuers to make entry after the mayday, and then it took 21.8 minutes to actually rescue the firefighter, and then 16 to 18 minutes for the structure to actually collapse. Bottom part of this slide, personnel needed. You need 12 firefighters to 1 rescued firefighter. So for us to do a complete rescue in this scenario, it was 12 to 1. And then more staggeringly, 5 to 1 for the ratio of rescuers who may get into trouble. In other words, RIT teams that were actively pursuing a RIT that also activated another RIT call while doing the RIT. Now let's kind of stumble over these numbers and really let this sink in. Okay, and let's go back to Firefighters Tarver's timetables at 53 minutes for the total time of the rescue. And this is why it took so many rescue teams to actually save him. If your 3,000 psi bottle only lasts 18.5 minutes, how the hell are you going to be able to do any type of rescue? And if it takes 2.5 minutes for the rescuers to get ready, knowing that they're going to be going and doing an actual RIT, you take that 18 minutes and add that 2.5 to it, but at least you can add another 2.5 minutes just to make entry. So it's a total of 5 minutes on top of the 18 minutes. We're already screwed. If it takes 21 minutes for the firefighter to be rescued on average, how on earth is that firefighter going to survive? They're not. It's impossible. The number's not there. They died at 18.5 minutes when their SCBA ran out of air. There's nothing you can do. So just from looking at this one slide, we have to be able to do a RIT in less than 18.5 minutes to a 3,000 psi bottle. And then more importantly, and this is the real staggering numbers, the personnel needed for firefighters to complete a rescue is 12 to 1. And out of those 12 people, we should expect 2 additional mayday calls, which will require another 12 people to pursue and rescue the other 2 maydays. 12 people apiece. So per mayday, we're expecting at least 2 more maydays, and we need a combination of 36 people. Are you starting to see the picture? Are you starting to see why RIT is a complete failure nationwide? So now that we've learned that we're screwed, what the hell do we do? Well, the first part of this is just addressing that we have a problem. And to really help you guys fully understand how serious this problem is nationwide, if you know another paid firefighter on a paid fire department, go ahead and ask them how often they practice RIT. Ask them what they do to train for RIT. Just try and figure out just how prepared they are for an actual RIT scenario. Their answer might be staggering to you. Now, us, how do we fix this? How do we address this? And then the whole purpose of this physical slideshow. We are going to train on RIT, and we are going to become very proficient in the concepts of RIT. But what do we train on? What should we train on? Well, let's just break it down fundamentally at the very beginning of RIT. Rapid. If you think back on our previous slides, there's nothing rapid about it. In fact, not only is it slow, it's terribly slow. There's nothing that we get out of this. There's no benefits to physically having a RIT that takes 45 minutes or 53 minutes or any other time. If you can't do a RIT in less than 10 minutes, I hate to say this, but we need to seriously consider calling off the RIT. Now, you need to really consider what I just said. I'm telling you to write off your buddy. I'm telling you to write off your potential mentor. I'm telling you to write off a family member. And that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable today. That's not acceptable tomorrow. That's not acceptable next year. We have to address RIT, and we have to do it competently. We should train on RIT to make it fast. Now, my question to you is your department prepared for a downed or trapped firefighter right now? Forget this rookie school for a second. Ask one of your department members, ask one of your officers what they really think of RIT, and do they think that their department's prepared for it? Be prepared for a whole slew of answers. I hope that they're positive about it, and they'll tell you how difficult RIT will be. But yes, we have something in place, but it's something that you ought to consider. And then the next question, are you prepared for RIT? And this is a really serious question, because this whole slideshow and the presentations I've made before have emphasized how hard firefighting is. Now you take the difficulties of firefighting and add in the human factor of stress and the fact that you know the clock is ticking and how critical your actions are going to be. And are you prepared for RIT? It is a realistic question. You have to be prepared to answer that. Here's another thing to consider with are you prepared for RIT? Are you prepared to die? Because nationwide, that's how RIT operates. RIT's not successful. It's so rarely successful, it's scary. Most firefighter RIT saves are by the firefighter themselves. Self-extrication, self-survival, self-rescue. That doesn't mean that there's not firefighters doing incredible work out there and saving their brothers and sisters in times of need. But I can tell you off the top of my head multiple incidents where RIT got more people killed simply because they weren't prepared for it. It's a hard question, and I'm asking you a really hard and difficult answer. If I give you the right training, in my opinion, and I give you enough time to practice, are you still prepared for RIT? Hopefully you've listened to that last slide and you've actually thought about what I've just said. The answer is an honest one. We have to look at line of duty deaths and learn from their mistakes. And in my very limited experience and my minuscule knowledge of local firefighting, I've learned that RIT is too slow. This is what we are going to train on, and this is what we are going to learn through our RIT school here in Granbury. We will be ready for RIT on scenes. You have to have people ready. Even if it's incoming engines that are 3 or 4 or 5 minutes out, have them assigned to RIT. Get people on RIT. Have a plan. Make sure that RIT team is actually capable of running RIT. Make sure that RIT team's actually practiced RIT. Third, have gear. This is one of the most important things on the list. Not only do you have to physically be capable of running RIT, not all RIT scenarios are the same, and you have to be adequately geared for it. Lastly, know how to use the gear. I assure you, through us, we will teach you how to use the RIT bags, and it's just a giant SCBA bottle and extra breathing lines attached to a 75-minute SCBA bottle. It's a fantastic tool, but if you don't know how to use it, it's absolutely useless. Understand that if you fail, the firefighter can die. Are you going to be able to live with that? Serious questions need serious answers. You have to be able to answer that, not me, not your chief, not your assistant chief, not your fellow firefighters. This is a gut check, and this is something you need to answer, and you need to be honest about this answer. And then there's also your personal fate in making the wrong decision. You decide to back out and abandon on a firefighter rescue because the conditions have deteriorated too much. Are you going to be able to live with that decision? These are serious factors of RIT. They have to be considered and they have to be discussed now. Now, we'll have a lot more discussion on the skills night of this, but don't be afraid to talk to the instructors or fellow students in the class or even in your home departments. These are great conversations to have at your home departments. Please have them. Now, one thing seriously to consider in RIT, and this is something that I personally feel that should be considered at more than just Granbury and Hood County, but should probably be a discussion, at least in my opinion, nationwide, is what are the most likely types of RIT are we going to encounter? And you should have some pictures pop up here in a second, and we're going to go in detail on that. But I want you to give me 3 different RIT scenarios, but I want you to give me the 3 most likely RIT scenarios that we're going to physically encounter if we ever have one. I feel that the most likely RIT scenario that we'll have in Hood County is going to be on the bottom right, heart related. And it's not just heart, but it's medical. I feel like that our most likely scenario for RIT is you're going to have 2 interior firefighters doing an interior attack, and one of them just drops out. The other firefighter's going to turn, they're going to look at him, and they're going to be unconscious, unresponsive. And now this is something to seriously consider. What can that firefighter do at that exact moment for that downed firefighter? What does that firefighter truly need at that exact moment? What do they truly need? Well, the first thing that needs to happen is the Mayday call. But after the Mayday call, that firefighter has to make a decision. Are they going to stay there and protect the downed firefighter and wait for the RIT team to come to them? Or are they going to try and do a self-rescue with that firefighter? Let's not forget at how far along you're advanced into the fire. If you've been humping hose for already 15 minutes and then that firefighter succumbed, how much air is left in your bottle? How much work are you still going to be able to do at the most critical time of that firefighter's need? You're already tired, you're already exhausted potentially, and now you're going to work yourself to an absolute maximum by doing a self-rescue by yourself. Things to consider. There is no correct answer there. But assuming that they sit there and they wait for the RIT crew to get to them, what does the RIT crew need to do? Do we need to sit here and mess with the RIT bag and make sure that they get hooked up to air? Or does the RIT crew just need to grab them and get them outside? Again, let's just go through a small list of what the medical emergencies can be. You can have a heart attack, stroke, diabetic emergencies, heat exhaustion, heat stress, and a whole slew of other stuff. Guess what the overall treatment for all this stuff is in the immediate scenario? Get them outside. Get them outside so that we can actually start getting their air off of them, their SCBA off of them, get their PPE off. See if they're breathing. See if they have a pulse. Hook them up to an EKG. Check their heart rates. Get them cooled off. None of this can happen inside. If you are with a firefighter that has become unconscious and unresponsive, the correct answer is get RIT deployed and get them outside. Do not screw with the RIT bag. Get them out. Now, the second thing that I think is most likely to occur in Hood County is going to be the middle picture. And you might think that that's a fine picture of me in the middle jumping off the loading dock, but it's not. And my purpose of this picture is what do you think is going to happen when that fat guy jumps down to the ground? There's a good chance there's going to be an impact crater and probably a broken bone. And I really think that a mechanical injury is going to be the second most likely type of RIT scenario that we're going to have. And again, now we take the slides at the very beginning and put them into perspective. You are inside a toxic, hazardous, burning atmosphere with a broken leg or a broken back even. Where do I need to go? And where do I need to go for treatment? And how cautious do we have to be about moving that individual? In the grand scheme of things, you need to get them out right now, no matter how painful it is or how bad it hurts them. The best action is to get RIT inside and get them drug outside. Now, one thing to consider in this is the RIT bag. Do we need the RIT bag right this second? It's just another consideration. Take the time to hook them up to the RIT bag to get them connected to the air to drag them out 30 feet, or the RIT crew arrives, drops the bag, and everyone drags the downed firefighter out. Just a scenario to think about. Now, the third most likely situation that I think we'll encounter in Hood County, and it's by far the scariest overall, is a structure collapse. If you have a firefighter trapped inside by debris from a structure collapse, you have a whole slew of problems that just happened. Not only do we need to actually find the location of the downed firefighter, we have to physically get to the downed firefighter, and once we get to them, they're probably still going to be pinned or trapped. So at this point, now we need to be getting them on the RIT bag, because I can guarantee you, just due to the stress of the scenario, they're going to start getting low on breathing air. The RIT bag comes into play on the most unlikely event to happen. And these are just three most likely scenarios that I think will happen in Hood County. But go back to our original slide, have a plan. This is what we're planning for in RIT. This is where we're going to put all of our training and skills acquired from this class into action. The very last thing that I want to talk about on this slide, and it is important because it's firefighter health, but it's also your overall conditioning. And what I want to talk about is the heart-related risk. Nearly a third of the 449 heart attack-related deaths among firefighters occurred while fighting blazes. Firefighter duties at the time of heart-related deaths from 1994 to 2004. 32.1% were deaths during fire attack. 17.4% were deaths from returning from a call. 15.4% were fire station and other non-emergency duties. 13.4% was responding to an alarm. 12.5% occurred during training, and 9.4% during EMS or non-fire emergencies. Now, I want to go through these numbers in just a little more detail. The heart attacks during firefighting make sense just because your physical stress levels, your physical work levels they're through the roof at that time. There's a million factors that are physically causing your heart to beat faster and cause a lot more work to your heart. Now, the 17.4% returning from calls, what that number is and what that represents is people that just work too hard on scene, and they literally caused the heart attack to themselves because of the amount of work they did. They just wore their heart out. Now the 15.4% fire station or other non-emergency duties, that's just bad luck. You had the big one while you were at work. 13.4% responding to alarm. The vast majority of those happened at night. And the occurrence was as the firefighter was sleeping, the tones went off for a structure fire, and they immediately go from a resting heart rate to a structure firefighting heart rate. Their heart rate like tripled in the matter of 2 heartbeats. And it was just a massive shock. And then the very last one on physical training, it was guys that just worked too hard during training and they had a heart attack. Primarily because they didn't want to admit that they were having a heart attack. Firefighters all know the signs of a heart attack, but they're classic at it completely ignoring all the signs of a heart attack. RIT training should be the ultimate reality check. What are you going to do that will kill someone or ourselves? When we're doing a RIT operation, for us to be successful, everything has to work flawlessly. There cannot be mistakes. There's too much already stacked against you. Everything's already wrong. We have to pay attention to, we have to address, and we have to work on what is out there that's going to bite us in the ass. Fear not. What are we going to do that's going to make us the hero? It starts right here. And it starts with you taking these classes back to your home departments and having these discussions. Every single fire department in the country should be taking RIT seriously. Every single fire department in the country should be having an active plan for their RIT crews. And every single fire department in the country should be prepared for RIT and the requirements of RIT. This is where it starts. This is how we make those saves on scene. It's the only way that it's possible. I want to thank everyone again for taking the Granbury Volunteer Fire Academy online and putting the time, energy, and effort into doing our skills modules each week. RIT is something that I take very personal. I think it's very, very important, and I cannot emphasize it enough. I just feel like there is a national standard that is lacking on RIT, and instead of making it more complex and making it harder to do, focus on one thing: how to make RIT faster. Make yourself operate faster. Make your teams operate faster. The firefighter that's down, the one that issued the Mayday, they don't need breathing air as much as they need speed. The faster you operate, the faster you're going to save them. Whether they're conscious or unconscious at the time of the rescue, they need speed. And I want you to focus on that. Now, lastly, I do want you to understand that my opinions on RIT are solely mine. And I definitely am speaking in the tradition of RIT against the national standard. This is a discussion that you should have in earnest at your home departments and with your fire department officers. You're going to have people that flat out tell me I'm wrong. And that's okay. Because at the end of the day, my views on RIT are just that. It's just my little bit of experience on scene and a little bit of training that I've had. I will never be able to critique or criticize any firefighter, paid or volunteer, that's ever actually had to do a RIT, and hopefully a very successful RIT. The unfortunate thing is that all scenarios aren't created equal. Not all firefighters are created equal, and not all fire departments are created equal. RIT is the single greatest disaster waiting for every volunteer fire department in the world. Paid or volunteer, it doesn't matter. When RIT happens, no one is truly prepared for it. The only thing we can do is hope that our training, our knowledge, and our practice in our skills pays off.